first realized I was in trouble when I noticed that my phone was vibrating off the coffee table, all while some grinning guy with a creepy vacuum insisted I ignore it. Before that moment, my day had been trudging along like every other recent Tuesday, sitting on the couch, half listening to a podcast about conspiracy theories while waiting for my coffee to cool. I'm a mid-20s college student with no particular ambition, except maybe leveling up in whichever shooter game I was addicted to that week. But my younger brother Noah, 19 going on 45, had already finished 2 hours of study by the time I was done microwaving leftover pizza. Our parents entrusted us with the house for a few months, while they did something important in another country. I was never completely clear on the details. Something about corporate consulting or industrial synergy, which might as well be code for "we're leaving you alone, try not to burn down the house, and remember to water the plants." After all, my brother Noah was the star child. He had the sterling GPA, the full ride to a fancy university, and a face that practically belonged on a billboard for overachievers. In contrast, I was struggling to stay afloat, having changed my major 3 times in 2 years. There's a certain irony in being the older brother, but feeling more like the awkward nephew who forgot to bring dessert to family dinner. But at least the two of us got along decently in that comedic dynamic, where I'd be in the background, providing dark commentary while he was doing something brilliant. So anyways, there I was, about to grab my phone and see who was spamming me with messages when he showed up. A sharply dressed vacuum salesman on our porch, with a dimpled smile and hair slicked so perfectly it looked like a helmet molded onto his skull. "Good morning," he declared, even though it was basically noon. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I'm here to show you the finest vacuum cleaner ever designed. May I come in?" Normally, I'd mumble something like, "I can't buy anything without my parents around," but I was too groggy to muster that. Also, he exuded a dangerous charm that bypassed my usual skepticism. One moment, I was standing in the doorway. The next, he was standing on our living room rug, setting his black briefcase down like he owned the place. As he unlatched the case, I glanced at my phone and saw a bright emergency alert flashing across the lock screen. But before I could read more, the salesman gently positioned himself, blocking my view, placing a hand on my shoulder in a way that felt both comforting and invasive. "No need to worry about that," he said smoothly, voice warm. "Let's focus on how I can make your life easier." He popped open the briefcase. Nestled inside was a sleek vacuum so advanced-looking, it could have been stolen from a sci-fi prop room. Its surface was matte black, and I heard a faint hum like a subdued motor. But beneath that hum lay something unbelievable. Soft whispers, layered in a way that triggered goosebumps on my arms. He noticed my confusion and smiled wider. "This vacuum is so quiet, you'll hardly notice it's on. You can run it while watching TV and never miss a word." I forced a laugh, but my heart thumped louder. "Wow, that's neat." He tapped the vacuum almost affectionately. "Indeed, it practically hungers for dirt," he said, letting the word hungers hang in the air a bit too long. My phone buzzed again, urgent vibrations making me sweat. I finally managed to angle it so I could see the alert. It said, "Emergency alert, lock all doors immediately. Do not engage with traveling salesmen." My gaze flicked to the salesman in my house, who was currently eyeing our worn family bookshelf. He caught my anxious look and raised a curious brow. "Is something bothering you?" he asked, voice still smooth as glass. I slipped my phone back in my pocket. "No, just a friend texting me," I lied. My voice wobbled, but he didn't press. "Excellent," he replied. "Then, let me show you why this might be the last vacuum you ever need." He flipped a switch on the vacuum, and I heard a soft, mechanical hum that rose in intensity. Underneath it, those whispers grew more distinct, making the hair on my neck prickle. I could have sworn a faint voice sighed, "Help us." The salesman angled the nozzle near me. "You see how powerful it is, yet it's quieter than a gentle breeze," he boasted. "One could vacuum a nursery while the baby slept, never disturbing a soul." Once again, my phone went off with another emergency alert. As my pulse spiked, the man casually brushed his hand across the vacuum's handle, and I heard a muffled moan from inside. That was it. My survival instincts, lazy as they typically were, finally kicked in. "I'm sorry," I blurted, "but I really need to run to the bathroom." "Something about leftover pizza." I let out a forced chuckle. He cocked his head, eyes flicking to the phone outline in my pocket, but his grin never wavered. "Of course, take your time. I'll wait right here." Without wasting a second, I practically sprinted out of the living room, ran down the hallway, and locked myself in the basement with my heart pounding like it wanted to exit my chest. Down there, I found Noah, perched at a desk under the dim basement light, flipping through an advanced quantum mechanics textbook. He glanced up, eyebrows raised. "You look like you're escaping a building on fire," he said. "Close enough," I replied, leaning against the door. "Some vacuum salesman's upstairs, and our phones keep screaming to lock all doors and not engage. The guy has a weird, whispering vacuum. It's beyond creepy." Noah clicked his pen shut and folded his arms, curiosity sparking. "A whispering vacuum? That's definitely not normal. Did he threaten you?" I shook my head, trying to slow my breathing. "He's too polite, which honestly feels worse. My phone says he's dangerous, so I locked myself down here." Noah stood up, pushing his textbook aside. "All right, we should barricade ourselves or something until he leaves." We dragged an old metal cabinet and a shelf in front of the basement door. The overhead light flickered once, and the entire place felt colder than usual. We both fell silent, listening. Sure enough, faint footsteps sounded overhead, crossing from the living room toward the basement steps. "Hello," the salesman called out, voice friendly. "Is everything all right? You've been down there for a while." Neither of us responded. A slow tapping replaced his greeting, then the footsteps receded. Noah ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "This is truly insane," he whispered. I nodded, feeling an uneasy laugh bubble in my chest. "Yeah, tell me about it." Since every bone in my body insisted we hide, I did the only thing that made sense. Consult the internet, specifically the less savory corners where folks discuss cryptid sightings and cursed objects. The old desktop in the basement took ages to boot up, humming like it might burst into flames at any second. Noah hovered behind me, occasionally glancing at the blocked door. I typed "whispering vacuum" into a search bar, not expecting to find anything serious. And yet, one solitary thread appeared. It was titled, "Beware the Whispering Vacuum. It Devours Souls." The post, written by Spectral Observer, detailed a weirdly similar scenario. A traveling salesman hawking a black vacuum that moaned like trapped spirits. The new buyer always seemed to lose vitality, while the old seller mysteriously grew stronger. Noah skimmed the text over my shoulder, brow furrowed. "That's definitely out there," he said, though his voice was laced with concern. "I know," I replied, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. "But it lines up uncomfortably well." Further down, someone else talked about hearing desperate whispers at night. But the last comment, written by Soul Seeker, ended abruptly. "I dug too deep, and now he's coming for me. If you see him, lock your doors. God help you if," and that was it. No more post, no closure. Silence hung between Noah and me as we both realized this was no harmless legend. After that, we waited in the basement for what felt like forever, hearts pounding whenever the salesman's footsteps passed overhead. Eventually, the noise stopped, and my phone chimed with more alerts, repeating the same "do not engage" message. We crept upstairs, expecting to see him lurking. Instead, the living room sat empty, except one object was left there. It was the vacuum. It stood upright, humming faintly, like it belonged there. A small note pinned beneath it read, "Enjoy your new purchase." Noah and I stared at each other, baffled. "He just left it," I said, throat tight. "Like he wants us to keep it," Noah murmured, glancing warily toward the front door. "If it really is cursed, we can't just leave it here in the open." We settled on dragging it to the basement. As soon as we gripped it, I heard that faint whisper intensify, as though it recognized we were touching it. "Feels like it's alive," I said, wiping sweat from my temple. Noah nodded uneasily. "Better locked down here than in our living room." We trudged back upstairs, locking the door behind us, telling ourselves we'd trapped the problem. But the pit in my stomach insisted this was just the beginning. Night took over, bringing with it a barrage of grim local news. Every station urged people to stay indoors due to traveling salesmen allegedly connected to multiple vanishings. The anchors now openly suggested that these vanishings were actually murders, souls trapped inside that device, leaving no trace. Some anchors used the term public threat, while others implied these objects were cursed. My phone's battery dropped to 50%, then 40%, as it kept flashing updates about fatalities linked to door-to-door scams. I risked a glance at Noah, who was flipping through a biology text with an uncanny speed. Not too long ago, we had been twin slackers, satisfied with microwaved nachos and late-night gaming sessions. Then, in a blink, he turned into the star child who breezed through advanced classes and woke up at ungodly hours to study. It was the sort of transformation people joked about. Maybe he made a deal with the devil or found a genie's lamp. Now, given the context, the devil joke didn't feel so funny. "Dude," I said, halfway between a joke and an accusation, "where did you find the cheat code to become Mr. Perfect?" He shrugged without looking up. "I just got motivated." The tension in his voice made me wonder if motivation was code for something darker. Then, sometime near midnight, I couldn't fight the urge anymore. I had to check on that vacuum. I snuck down to the basement alone, the silence pressing in on my ears. The vacuum stood exactly where we'd left it, that gentle hum taunting me. But my eyes locked on the walls. Words had appeared where there'd been blank concrete. They were scrawled in dark smears, phrases like, "Let me out." "He has us, we are trapped." My heart pounded. They looked fresh, as though someone had just penned them. I remembered those forum posts about basement graffiti appearing on its own. Then a bigger phrase caught my eye, scrawled in overlapping, frantic letters. "The vacuum feeds on us." A chilled wave flooded my veins. I shined my flashlight on the vacuum. Unplugged, yet still humming. The whispers rose, forming something akin to muffled wails. I stood there, numb with fear, until my phone buzzed again with a new city alert about missing citizens. Snapped out of my trance, I sprinted upstairs, nearly colliding with Noah in the hallway. He frowned, noticing my sweaty forehead. "Are you all right?" I swallowed hard. The basement walls are covered in new graffiti about souls, about the vacuum devouring them. His brow furrowed. "That's impossible," he said almost rudely, but I glimpsed something haunted flicker behind his eyes. Around 1:00 a.m., I found another forum link proclaiming a hidden, final post about the whispering vacuum. I clicked through multiple warnings, each one telling me to stop if I valued my soul. The thread I found was titled, "The Final Warning. Once you see the vacuum, you're marked." A user named Shadow Key insisted these salesmen weren't normal humans, and that the vacuum essentially chose an owner, siphoning their soul over time. He wrote that the souls trapped inside would leave signs, like those shifting graffiti scrawls, and if you kept investigating, you risked joining them. I scrolled further, heart hammering. A final post by Midnight Witness read, "The vacuum doesn't just target random nobodies. It hunts for potential, someone who can handle the soul's power without falling apart. If your sibling or roommate transforms overnight, you might already be too late. Stop them before they devour everything." I read that last line again, feeling my legs turn to jelly. If your sibling transforms, that described Noah to a T. I drifted off on the couch around 2:00 a.m., only to jolt awake, thirst scratching at my throat. The house felt suffocatingly quiet. In the kitchen, I poured a glass of water, glancing at the window out of habit, and froze. Reflected in the glass behind me stood Noah, silent as a statue. But in that reflection, his eyes glowed with an eerie brightness, pulsing as though lit by some internal source of power. I nearly dropped my glass. Then, while swiveling around, I saw him standing there, eyes normal brown again. "Hey," he said with a calm voice. "Did you have problems sleeping?" I forced a chuckle. "I guess so. I thought I heard something." He studied my face, like he was debating how much I'd seen. "You're pale," he noted, stepping closer. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I lied, trying to keep my composure. "Just jumpy from the alerts and that salesman fiasco." Noah nodded, but his expression remained unreadable. "We're all tense, I guess. Let's try to get some rest." By morning, I felt like I'd aged a decade. My phone kept blasting warnings about traveling salesmen, suspicious incidents, and missing persons. The TV anchors had grim faces, droning on about entire neighborhoods losing contact with the outside world. Noah hovered at the table, leafing through a calculus textbook as if it were a children's picture book. He rarely blinked, rarely showed fatigue, and hadn't shaved in days, yet he looked fresh. I sipped on subpar coffee, trying to calm the swirl of dread in my chest. A few hours after that anxious morning, I found myself glued to a local news live stream, hoping it might offer some clue about the salesman or the bizarre vacuum. Noah was pacing behind me, occasionally glancing at the basement door like it was calling his name. On the screen, a tired-eyed anchor discussed the rash of people forcibly taken and killed in our neighborhood. The stories now claimed the victims' bodies were never found because they were trapped inside the same black vacuum. Most reports pinned the blame on unidentified strangers, but one mention caught my attention. A neighbor who claimed she saw a familiar face lurking around her yard at night. That's when I realized it. For weeks, I'd scrolled past social media posts about missing dog owners, older men who didn't show up at the corner store, or a college student who never made it back from her library shift. At the time, I chalked it up to random tragedies. But now, with all the talks about that cursed vacuum, I worried these events were connected. Noah pretended not to notice the panic on my face, though I saw him pause whenever the anchor read out names of the vanished. Sarah Haynes, age 21, missing since last month. Lionel Richards, 47, last seen walking his dog. How many people have to go missing before the cops do something? I said, only half to Noah. He cleared his throat, still staring at the screen. Maybe they're stretched thin, he said, avoiding my eyes. We can't rely on them. His weird tone set off alarm bells. I wanted to press him, but the fear of hearing a confession nearly paralyzed me. Instead, I turned back to the TV, heart pounding. The anchor moved on to other grim updates. A traveling salesman spotted at the edge of town, more warnings to lock doors and windows. By the time the broadcast ended, my palms were slick with sweat. Unable to handle the quiet, it was around nighttime when I opened a local message board on my laptop, this time sifting through posts about the strange wave of vanishings, that started months ago. People had theories, maybe a serial killer or organ traffickers, or even a rogue ghost. But as I skimmed more posts, another uneasy pattern popped in my mind. The earliest missing person cases clustered around our immediate area, barely a 5-minute walk from our driveway. And strangest of all, the dates almost perfectly matched the time frame of Noah suddenly getting straight A's and sailing through school. Snippets of conversation flickered in my head. Mom praising him for really coming into his own. Dad bragging about his genius son. Me feeling vaguely guilty for not matching his ambition. But then, as I was halfway through reading another chilling forum post about the vanishings, one that suggested entire families were wiped out in a single night, when a subtle motion at the window caught my eye. It was the faintest reflection, like someone brushing up against the glass. My stomach clenched, that primal instinct flaring bright. Fighting a surge of fear, I inched toward the window, phone clutched tight in my hand. Outside, dim porch light cast pale ribbons across the yard. And there, illuminated just enough to be unmistakable, was that sharply dressed salesman staring right at me through the glass. He wore the same polite, yet predatory smile he'd shown on our front porch. Seeing him so close, I felt pinned under his gaze. My heart galloped, and for a bizarre instant, all I could think was, how is he so silent? He might have been standing on nothing, weightless in the gloom. The corners of his mouth curved up like he was delighted to find me reading about his handiwork. Like I was a mouse, and he was the cat who'd strolled in to observe the mouse's panic. For a moment, he simply breathed onto the glass, fogging it up. "You're learning far more than you should," he said in that smooth tone. "Reading about all these disappearances." He enunciated the word with a hint of amusement. My voice caught in my throat. Stay away," I croaked, trying to sound brave. He shook his head slowly, as though disappointed. "I can't do that. We have an arrangement, your brother and I. But you seem too curious. That curiosity can be fatal, you know. You've read about how some vanish by morning," he continued, quietly stepping forward, forcing me to shuffle back. "Were you hoping to rescue them?" The salesman's grin stretched, revealing impossibly white teeth. "You can't stop what was already set in motion months ago. Perhaps you should worry more about what your brother is doing at night. You can't be everywhere, you know." Before I could retort, he blinked out of sight. 1 second he was there. The next I was staring at empty air. I stepped into Noah's room, and unsurprisingly, he was again flipping through another textbook at light speed. Unable to contain my fear and curiosity, I said, "I'm going to check on the vacuum again," as though it was a normal part of the daily routine. His shoulders stiffened. "All right," he replied. "Just be cautious." The basement was silent except for the vacuum's weird hum. It looked exactly where we left it, but I noticed new lines on the walls, layering over old scribbles. "Please let us free." Why won't he stop? He knew from the start. My flashlight trembled in my grasp. Suddenly, one more phrase flared to life, as if written that moment: "Your brother devours." I stumbled back. If Noah had been feeding on souls from the get-go, that salesman's arrival was only the final piece. Before I could process further, footsteps sounded above. The door to the basement opened, revealing Noah. His expression looked tense, concerned. "Are you all right?" he asked, scanning my face. I shoved down the panic, forcing a nod. "I'm fine," I said. Then I slipped past him, all too aware that my face probably betrayed the terror inside. One sleepless and terrifying night later, I threw myself back into the darkest forum corners, searching for anything we might have missed. But before I got to the reading part, Noah entered the room again, eyeing the laptop. "Are you still reading about that cursed vacuum?" he asked, trying for a casual tone that fell flat. My mouth felt dry. and about siblings who apparently feed on souls. Does it sound familiar? He swallowed, glancing away. You think I'm that sibling? I stood, fists clenched. I'm connecting dots. You changed practically overnight, soared academically, and apparently have no need for sleep or, normal human rest. Did you know about the vacuum before it showed up? He opened his mouth, but no words came. His cheeks tightened with frustration. Then, with a short growl, he spun away. You're letting paranoid forum posts warp your brain, he snapped, voice cracking. Yet the slight tremor in his tone screamed guilt. That afternoon, a rapid, frantic knocking pummeled our front door. I peeked through the window, relieved yet alarmed to see Mrs. Allen from 2 streets over, her usual neat hair replaced by disheveled locks, eyes swirling with desperation. Against the bright red text warning still flashing on my phone, I opened the door a crack, chain secured. Mrs. Allen, I asked gently, is everything all right? Her hand shook against the doorframe. No, my son. He was out selling cookies for a fundraiser. He never came home. Neighbors saw a traveling salesman around him, and now he's just gone. My stomach twisted like I'd swallowed razor blades. I'm sorry, I managed. We haven't seen him. The authorities keep telling us to stay locked in. Her gaze flicked from me to the hallway, but the moment she spotted Noah lurking behind me, her expression twisted in raw terror. She took a step back as if she expected him to lunge at her. You have to be careful, she whispered, voice trembling. Then her wide, stricken eyes latched onto Noah. He's the one who tried to, her voice caught, tears brimming. A month ago, I was in my backyard. I heard footsteps, turned and saw him. He tried to kill me or drain me, I don't know. I ran for my life. I swear it was him. I couldn't speak, my heart pounding so fiercely I feared it might explode. Noah stood rigid, not denying it, not defending himself. Mrs. Allen's face crumpled with grief and terror. I just want my son back, she sobbed. But watch yourselves. Evil is everywhere. She fled into the street before I could respond, throwing one last terrified glance at Noah. I shut the door, chain rattling in my trembling hand. Noah exhaled, tears or regret pooling behind his dark gaze. This is what's happening, he whispered, voice hollow. People are terrified. I almost demanded the truth then and there. But words failed me. The second night fell like a shroud, heavy with impending doom. The hum from the basement grew louder, as if the vacuum sensed the crescendo of events. Noah paced the living room, darting looks at the locked basement door like it was a magnet pulling him in. My phone was down to 30% battery, still erupting with citywide announcements. Injuries reported. Door-to-door sales remain a threat. If you suspect unusual family behavior, call emergency services. I tried to distract myself by playing a puzzle game on my laptop, but every shifting shadow, every squeak of the house, jerked my attention back to the possibility that Noah might snap any moment. Mrs. Allen's words about him, almost killing her, echoed in my head, a grim reminder that we were long past normal sibling arguments. Somewhere around 2:00 a.m., sleepless anxiety shoved me off the couch. I heard faint movement in the kitchen and tiptoed to investigate. Through the window, I saw Noah stepping barefoot into the yard, ignoring the chilly dew on the grass. Then, in the dim glow of the streetlight, I noticed a silhouette that resembled my brother. But this time, he wasn't merely staring at his reflection. He was holding the vacuum nozzle like a funnel of darkness. I squinted in horror to see a trembling figure in front of him, arms flailing as the nozzle pulled them in. I caught a glimpse of their face contorted in silent terror. An awful sound, a deep rush of air, plus muffled screams, told me the vacuum was actually sucking the poor soul inside, killing them by trapping them in that cursed device. My stomach lurched, and I nearly dropped my phone. Had I truly just witnessed Noah murdering someone, draining their life? Or was it even Noah at all? The shape's posture, the hair, even the jacket, all looked like him, but the yard was too dark. Heart hammering, I ran for the front door. By the time I stepped outside, the silhouette had vanished. The yard lay still, except for the night breeze rustling leaves. My throat felt raw with panic. I tore back inside and sprinted down to the basement, needing to confirm if the vacuum was gone. Sure enough, I found the usual spot in the corner empty. The basement felt colder than ever. A swirl of dread gripped me. My eyes darted to the graffiti, half expecting new lines about a fresh soul devoured. Noah appeared at the top of the steps, breathing heavily. "What's going on?" he asked, face guarded. I stared at him, skin clammy. "The vacuum, it's missing." He paused, glancing behind him with a forced shrug. "I was just examining it. Figured I should study what's inside," he said, voice carefully neutral. "No big deal," my heart seized. Examining it. He didn't admit to anything, but I could practically taste the guilt on his words. I wanted to scream that I'd seen him outside, sucking a helpless person into that monstrous machine. But I couldn't form the accusation. Terror and disbelief clashed in my mind, leaving me numb. I let out a ragged breath, stepping aside as he moved past me. The vacuum was nowhere in sight, and I felt certain if I challenged him, it would end badly. Trying to swallow my horror, I backed away, wondering if all the rumors and sightings I'd read about were mild compared to what was happening right under my nose. Morning arrived, but the sunlight felt thin and unhelpful, barely cutting through the dread clinging to the house. I noticed the basement door slightly open, again, though I knew I'd locked it. With a sense of doom, I crept down the stairs, half expecting to find the vacuum running on its own. Instead, I saw the vacuum on its side, humming away like it had been shoved aside in a hurry. The graffiti on the walls had grown, lines overlapping. He tried to consume her. His guilt won't stop him. My heart twisted painfully at the mention of her. It had to be Mrs. Allen. The vacuum's trapped souls were confirming her story. I ran my palm over its handle. It felt warmer than before, pulsing with a steady heartbeat of whispering voices. They seemed to moan, help us," but it was too faint to parse. Shivering, I realized the final piece. Noah had begun devouring souls long before the traveling salesman officially dropped the vacuum here. He was no victim, he was a participant. I forced myself to leave, tears pricking my eyes. By midday, I'd reached a breaking point. Noah and I sat at the table, bowls of cereal between us, tension so thick we could barely breathe. "Mrs. Allen says you tried to kill her a month ago." I finally blurted, each word like glass shards in my throat. He stiffened, spoon halting mid-lift. "She's insane," he said, voice hollow. Slamming my palm on the table, I glared at him. "Don't lie," I hissed. "The walls downstairs literally say, 'You consume people.' She looked at you like you were the devil himself." Anguish contorted his features. "I didn't mean to hurt her," he muttered, setting the spoon aside. "I needed just a sliver of energy for an exam. She was alone. I thought I could siphon enough to get a boost." His voice shook. But she fought back. Revulsion choked me. "So it's true," I whispered. "All those vanishings and the rumors. You've been at this for months." Tears gathered in his eyes, yet a strange hardness lingered. I felt weak, worthless. I hated the pressure at school. Everyone calling me to be the star child. Meanwhile, you drifted through college and I needed more. He swallowed. The vacuum gave me an edge. I didn't expect the hunger to grow like this. I stared at him, tears burning. "You killed people for your own pride." He squeezed his eyes shut. "I know it's monstrous, but once I started, it was like a drug. I couldn't stop. My anger flared hot. And now we're dealing with a cursed vacuum that won't leave us alone. He nodded, voice thick. Yeah, he said softly. And it's too late to undo the damage. Shaken to my core, I tore through the house, hunting for some mythical way out, like a hidden manual that said, in case your brother devours souls, press this button. Instead, all I found were notebooks, scribbled with references to soul transfer, plus the ominous phrase, no turning back. Then my phone beeped. Possible internal threat in households. Report odd family behavior. I gave a harsh laugh. Odd family behavior, indeed. My own sibling had turned into a soul-sucking menace, and I was fresh out of solutions. I had no time to process or confront him further before a thunderous crash shattered our front door. Splinters rained across the hallway. The traveling salesman stepped into our home like a storm, suit torn, eyes blazing with unmasked fury. It's over, he snarled, scanning the living room. No more pretense. You are the new collector, Noah. Embrace it or be destroyed. Noah clenched his fists, stepping forward. I never asked for this, he spat back. The salesman let out a dry, humorless laugh. You asked enough. Don't pretend you didn't feed for months to get stronger. Now you're almost complete. A surge of anger tore through me. Get away from him, I yelled, chest tight. But the salesman dismissed me with a bored glance. You're irrelevant, let us finish this. Noah squared his shoulders, that cursed glow flickering in his eyes. I won't let you take any more souls, he said, voice trembling with both fear and resolve. The salesman's grin was more like a baring of teeth. We'll see about that. In a blur, the salesman lunged with superhuman speed, slamming Noah into a wall. One of our family photos crashed to the floor, glass splintering. My heart seized. I grabbed an old metal rod from the umbrella stand, rushing in blind panic. The salesman twisted effortlessly, striking my shoulder and knocking me aside like I weighed nothing. Noah let out a guttural roar, something half feral, and managed to shove the salesman away with an inhuman burst of strength. The man stumbled, surprise flashing in his eyes. You've grown, he said, voice low and charged. Impressive indeed. Noah's chest heaved, eyes flickering with that terrifying glow. I told you, he growled, I'm done feeding. The salesman shook his head, almost pitying. Curses don't care about your guilt. You either embrace it fully or become its next victim. I struggled upright, cradling my throbbing shoulder. Noah and the salesman faced each other like predatory animals, the air tense with unseen power. Noah, I shouted, voice shaking, don't give in to him. You can break the curse. He glanced at me, agony written across his face, then turned back to the salesman. No more killing, he insisted. The salesman's expression turned mocking. You're in denial. Think of all the vanishings you've caused, all the people you have killed. You've already taken so many souls. One more step, and your potential will be limitless. I saw Noah's shoulders quiver, torn between remorse and the dark pull of the vacuum's power. Time stretched out as the two stared each other down. I imagined Noah recalling the neighbors he consumed, Mrs. Allen's terror, all the illusions that led him here. Then the salesman made his move, raising a hand crackling with a sickly, dark aura. Noah snarled, that swirling black mist I'd glimpsed in the basement coiling around him. They collided again with violent force, toppling a bookshelf, scattering books across the floor. I threw myself aside, narrowly avoiding the chaos. For a tense moment, Noah pinned the salesman to the wall, blood trickling from the man's lip. Yet the salesman still managed an eerie grin. Finish it now, he goaded. Take my power. Complete the cycle, be unstoppable. Noah froze, trembling head to toe. His gaze flicked from the salesman's battered face to me, where I crouched near the couch, fear plastered across my own. I shouted, No, don't do it, Noah. You can still, the salesman hissed. You don't understand, he craves it. All that brilliance with none of the guilt, that's what he wants. Noah's eyes brimmed with tears. I can't fight it, he rasped, voice cracking. I'm so sorry. Then, in a swift, almost balletic move, he slammed his fist into the salesman's chest. A spiraling vortex of black mist erupted, funneling from the salesman into Noah's body. The man let out a guttural moan, body going limp as though deflating. I watched, horrified, as the swirling darkness surged into Noah, amplifying the glow in his eyes. The salesman slumped to the floor like a doll with cut strings. Noah stood in the wreckage of our living room, chest heaving, the air around him sizzling with dark energy. He turned to me slowly, eyes no longer flickering but fully consumed by a blackness. What did you do? I asked, voice near a sob. He swallowed hard, speaking with a strange echo beneath his words. I can feel them, he whispered. All of them, the souls, the knowledge. It's too much to handle. I took a step back, heart pounding like a war drum. You can still stop. You don't have to feed anymore. His gaze darted to the shattered front door, then back to me. Regret and hunger warred on his face. I'm sorry, he repeated, tears shining in those eerie black eyes. But it's not my choice now. The entity demands it. Before I could utter another word, he moved, so quickly it was almost a blur, and slipped out into the dark street. I stumbled after him, adrenaline spiking, but when I reached the porch, he was gone, swallowed by the silent mist hugging the neighborhood. My phone started beeping with another emergency alert scrolling across the screen. Emergency update. New salesman behavior reported. Threat level rising. Do not leave your homes. But it was far too late. The salesman's corpse lay on our living room floor, and my brother, far more dangerous than any traveling vacuum vendor, had vanished into the night, powered by every soul he'd snatched. I sagged to my knees on the porch, tears hot against my cheeks. Clutching my phone with white-knuckled force, I stared down our empty street. Maybe I could warn someone, call the authorities. But would they believe me in time? Probably not. Not before Noah consumed more souls, or worse. Because the vacuum was destroyed, but the real threat, my cursed, brilliant, dangerous brother, had just begun his reign. And I had no clue how to stop the monster I'd unwittingly helped create. That's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed the video, subscribing to my channel would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.